My wife announced her pregnancy, but I am sterile. She cheated on me, and I kept playing along for months before. Before starting the video, it's very important that you subscribe to the channel and leave a like to help our channel grow. I am a 38-year-old man, married my 33-year-old wife 2 years ago. We have been dating for 3 years, and although she was more inclined toward marriage than I was, I agreed to make her happy. About a year ago, we started trying to have a baby, again at her insistence. We faced many difficulties during that period, which took a toll on my mental health. It was then that I decided to get some tests done. During this time, my wife became more aggressive, and while I tried to cope with her behavior, it was becoming unbearable. A few days after undergoing the tests, the doctors informed me that I was sterile. To be honest, it crushed me because even though I hadn't initially desired to be a father, I had started envisioning my life as one and truly wanted to have children. Learning that I would never be a father was devastating. But the worst was yet to come. I was trying to gather the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason we couldn't conceive, but I was terrified of how she might react. She was already so aggressive toward me, and I couldn't imagine how she would respond to finding out that what she wanted most likely wouldn't happen with me. So I waited a few days after receiving my test results to tell her, but then she surprised me. For days after I learned I was sterile, she asked to talk to me and said she had some important news to share. I was extremely scared because I thought she had somehow found out about my infertility, but no. She wanted to tell me that she was finally pregnant. I was in shock, but she was so happy that, fortunately, she didn't notice how shaken I was. She immediately started celebrating. I tried to share in her joy to avoid raising suspicions, but the next day, I took another test to confirm that I was indeed sterile. Once again, the results were the same. I was at a loss because if I wasn't the father, then my wife was definitely cheating on me. The medical procedures she would need to undergo to get pregnant artificially were expensive, and since I was the sole breadwinner, she couldn't have done anything without asking me for money. So, it was obvious that she had been unfaithful. The thought was horrifying and surreal, but I didn't take any action for a few days as she planned a big party to announce the pregnancy. She seemed so happy, and I was utterly devastated, but I couldn't let it show. I needed to figure out what was happening. I didn't tell my family because I felt it was too personal and uncomfortable to share. Besides, I couldn't confront my wife yet because too much time had passed, and I wanted to know exactly who the father of the child was to avoid being deceived further. If I confronted her, she might leave me, and I would never learn the truth. Fortunately, I discovered the truth on the day of the party. Many friends and family members were there, including some of my co-workers. She had also invited a neighbor who lived directly across from our house. He was a 27-year-old man, a very handsome model, undoubtedly more attractive than I was, not just to me, but to most people. He was trying to make a name for himself in the fashion world, lived with his aunt, and his family resided far away. My wife had always shown a certain fondness for him, preparing meals for him and his aunt when he first moved in. He had visited our home a few times for dinners, and we talked about his work. He seemed like a polite and well-informed person, and my wife, who also had a degree in literature, had much in common with him. They quickly got along well. I never had anything against him since he seemed kind, and I trusted my wife. However, the moment he walked into our house on the day of the party, I noticed something was different. She looked mesmerized and went straight to greet him, giving him a hug that lasted longer than any of the hugs she gave the other guests. No one else seemed to notice, but I realized something was going on between them. I needed proof, so I excused myself, saying I needed to use the bathroom, and went straight to the bedroom to open my wife's laptop. I'd already tried to check her phone while she was asleep, a few days after she told me she was pregnant, but I hadn't found anything suspicious. The laptop was harder to access because she was always using it when I was home. Whenever I asked what she was doing, she quickly turned the screen away and said she was working on her novel, which had been in progress for months. I had always respected her privacy because I believed she was genuinely writing a book. Now, the situation had changed, and I was almost certain she wasn't writing any novel. She was just using that as an excuse to hide what she was doing on the computer. Luckily, there was no password, and I gained access easily. After a few minutes of searching, I found an email account besides her primary one, which she used to communicate with a neighbor. Through their email exchanges, I discovered they had been sending love letters to each other. In the most recent emails, she was telling him she was pregnant, but he didn't take the news well and was upset. This caused their communication to stop for a while, likely because he wanted to end things, but my wife wasn't willing to let him go. Then I found the worst email of all, where she told him she had consulted a lawyer and planned to file for divorce as soon as the baby was born. She had convinced me to have a child so that, at the end of our marriage, she could secure child support and financial assistance to escape with the neighbor and live happily ever after. Reading that email horrified me, and even today, whenever I think about it, I feel immense disgust. I was utterly devastated after reading that message. It was everything I feared, but never imagined would be so cruel. My wife had been playing me, manipulating the entire situation. She planned to leave me with the child, probably to start a new life with the neighbor. I didn't know what to do. My heart was broken, and my mind was in turmoil. I loved my wife, but what she had done was unforgivable. That night, after the party ended and everyone left, I confronted her. She seemed surprised at first, but quickly became defensive, saying she was doing it all for us, for our happiness and family. She tried to justify her actions, claiming that the love she once felt for me had faded, and that when she discovered I couldn't father children, she felt alone and hopeless. However, she never cared about my feelings. She had lied to me the entire time. I didn't want to hear anything else because everything she said felt like an empty excuse for her actions. I decided I couldn't stay with her any longer. I didn't know what the future held for me, but what happened that day changed my life forever. The love I had for her turned into feelings of anger and betrayal. I eventually filed for divorce, and in the end, she left our home with a neighbor. I was left alone, unsure of how to deal with the pain, but I knew it was the best decision. The truth always comes out, and even though I suffered deeply, at least now I was free from that lie. Update 2. I was right. My wife is an idiot and decided to negotiate since she wasn't happy with the deal I had offered, which was essentially the amount she had spent during the marriage, and even that seemed pretty generous to me. I don't understand what miracle she thinks is going to happen, but anyway, good luck to her. She texted me yesterday, saying she had left the house. Today, I came home happy, thinking she had probably moved in with her parents, but I was deeply disappointed to find out she had only moved to our neighbor's house, right across the street. Now, I'll have to see her and her boyfriend every single day. I even considered going back to living in a hotel, but decided against it since this is my home, and I have every right to live wherever I want. I'm not moving just because they'll try to make me feel uncomfortable. I kept wondering why my wife didn't move in with her parents, since living with the neighbor would only hurt her divorce case, and she was just making things harder for herself. But I didn't have to wonder long because, as I scrolled through the unread messages I had received, I noticed one was from her father. I hadn't replied to many people who had texted me in the past few days, and his message had gotten lost among the others. It was a long message in which he apologized for what his daughter had done and told me they were completely against her actions. His words meant a lot to me and validated my emotions so much that I almost cried, but I held back. He apologized for my wife's behavior and said he had cut ties with her because she told him she wanted to contest the divorce. So far, nothing my wife has done has made any sense to me because everything she has done has backfired on her, and surely even someone like her should realize that. Either she is truly stupid or she still has some twisted tricks up her sleeve. I hope it's not the latter, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's capable of it. After all, she's practically the worst. This new living situation is definitely going to create some complications, and I'm sure they'll try to bother me or make me jealous. But I'm determined not to let it affect me because they'll use that against me. In the end, I'm saving a fortune since I don't have to live in a hotel. Update 3. It's been a month since negotiations for my divorce settlement started, and so far, things are going very badly for my wife. I managed to prove she was cheating on me, and she even made it easier for me by moving in with the guy I accused her of cheating with. So there's no way to dispute the validity of my accusations. She tried to make up some false claims that I was an alcoholic and therefore sterile, which would justify the fact that she had an affair. She alleged that when we were trying to conceive, I had become cruel and bitter toward her. But that was easily refuted since everyone knew I had quit drinking last year when we decided to try for a baby, and I haven't touched alcohol since. I don't know why she thought that would work. It was a very stupid move on her part. I guess she was just grasping at straws since her initial plan had failed miserably, and now she was too busy being a mom to be a petty, manipulative mind. She was overwhelmed, and the baby's father was too dumb to realize what was going on. Now they both know her chances of getting any alimony are very slim. I imagine she told her boyfriend about it because a few days ago, she was kicked out of his house in a very rough manner, baby in arms. Yes, that's right, I heard a lot of noise and shouting coming from there, and within minutes, I saw my wife and child being shoved out of the house while the guy's father yelled insults at her, calling her all sorts of names. I was watching everything from my living room, and as soon as I saw him pushing my wife out while she held the baby, I ran over to help. Resentment be damned. I wasn't going to let an innocent baby suffer for something that wasn't his fault. By the time I got to the door, the guy had already shut it, leaving my wife and baby crying outside. I took the baby in my arms and held my wife's hand to bring them back to my house across the street. Then I called my father-in-law so he could take them to his place. An hour later, he showed up and took them away, once again thanking me for everything I had done. During that hour, my wife cried like a child, and I ended up calming both her, and the baby. I wanted to call the police too, but she managed to convince me to let it go because she didn't want more trouble. She kept apologizing repeatedly for what had happened and told me she had been so desperate to stay with the man she loved that she had lost all her self-esteem and morals. She said she was truly sorry for everything and would accept whatever was to come. She no longer wanted to negotiate, and the divorce would be finalized faster. I think that's a good sign. I hope she decides to sue that guy eventually and heal herself too, but at least I did what I could and acted as a decent person. I have no regrets.